For decades, the death of Natalie Wood has haunted Hollywood, leaving fans, investigators, and the public with more questions than answers. The beloved star of West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause seemed to have it all. Talent, fame, and charm that could light up any room. But one cold night in November 1981, that bright light was extinguished under circumstances that were, for years, shrouded in mystery, speculation, and suspicion. For years, the story told to the public was simple: an accidental drowning. Yet whispers, rumors, and conflicting witness accounts suggested there was far more beneath the surface. A tension-filled night on a yacht, strange behaviors, and unexplained injuries. Fans and journalists alike speculated endlessly. Was it truly an accident? Was foul play involved? And why did the case remain clouded for decades, despite intense scrutiny? Now, after more than 40 years, new revelations have emerged. Authorities, private investigators, and insiders close to the case have finally shed light on what really happened aboard that yacht. And the truth, experts say, is far darker and more unsettling than anyone imagined. It isn't just about how Natalie Wood died. It's about what those around her were willing to hide, cover up, or remain silent about for decades. Hollywood has long tried to preserve her image as the eternally radiant star. But this new information forces us to confront uncomfortable realities about fame, secrecy, and the fragility of life. The Natalie Wood mystery isn't just solved. It challenges everything we thought we knew about that tragic night. What you're about to hear will make you reconsider the story, the people, and the events that led to one of Hollywood's most shocking and heartbreaking deaths. Natalie Wood's life was a blend of brilliance, fame, and charm that few could rival. Born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko in 1938, she was a child star whose career seemed destined for greatness from the very beginning. With performances in Miracle on 34th Street, Rebel Without a Cause, and eventually West Side Story, Natalie captivated audiences with a combination of vulnerability and magnetism that felt entirely authentic. But behind the glamour, Hollywood's brightest lights often cast the darkest shadows. And Natalie's story was no exception. By the time she married actor Robert Wagner in 1972, Natalie had already navigated decades of fame and scrutiny. She was a woman accustomed to the pressures of Hollywood, the relentless attention, the invasive media, and the constant judgment of her personal life. Friends and family describe her as fiercely independent, yet someone who deeply valued her personal relationships, often negotiating a careful balance between public appearances and private life. The night of November 28, 1981, changed everything. Natalie was aboard the yacht Splendor with her husband Robert Wagner, fellow actor Christopher Walken, and the ship's captain Dennis Davin. The official story for years described an accidental drowning, a tragic misstep while trying to get from the yacht to a smaller boat. But accounts of that night were inconsistent. Witnesses reported heated arguments, strange behavior, and circumstances that didn't quite align with a simple accident. Authorities initially treated the case as such, closing the investigation with the assumption that it was a tragic mishap. Yet over the decades, questions persisted. Investigators and journalists kept probing. Why had there been bruises on her body? Why did some accounts suggest she may have struggled in the water or been in a compromised state before falling? And why did those on the boat give conflicting statements? The more people speculated, the more the story became a puzzle, with pieces that didn't quite fit, leaving fans and the public with a gnawing sense that the full truth had yet to be revealed. Natalie's family, especially her sister Lana Wood and close friends, often expressed frustration at the lack of clarity surrounding her death. The mystery became part of her legacy, overshadowing her extraordinary career. Headlines, books, documentaries, and countless interviews tried to piece together the events of that night. Yet each new theory sparked more questions rather than answers. Even the legal and investigative processes seemed to stall. While the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department occasionally revisited the case, the narrative of accidental drowning persisted, reinforced by statements from those on the yacht and by the absence of conclusive evidence proving otherwise. Meanwhile, the world mourned Natalie as the bright, talented actress taken too soon. A tragedy marked by unanswered questions and lingering suspicion. But as decades passed, new evidence and testimonies began to surface. Advances in forensic science, combined with previously withheld witness accounts, gradually began to shed light on a night long obscured by secrecy, fear, and perhaps even protection of reputations. It became increasingly clear that what happened on Splendor was far more complex than anyone had imagined, and that the accident narrative might only tell part of the story. What initially seemed like a tragic misfortune was slowly revealed to involve human decisions, tensions, and conflicts that would ultimately shape one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. The night Natalie Wood died has long been enveloped in rumors, speculation, and conflicting testimonies. But a closer examination of the events aboard the Splendor reveals a far more troubling picture. According to accounts from the yacht's captain, Dennis Davin, and others who came forward years later, the evening was far from the calm, celebratory night that many initially believed. Tensions had been high throughout the evening, fueled by arguments, alcohol, and emotional strain. Natalie, sources say, had been frustrated with her husband Robert Wagner and their relationship dynamics. Friends and witnesses described the couple as having a complicated marriage, marked by both deep affection and moments of volatility. On that night, the disputes escalated into heated exchanges. Christopher Walken, a guest on the yacht, later recounted seeing signs of tension between the couple, though he claimed he was unaware of the full extent of the conflict. Investigators noted inconsistencies in the statements given by those on board. For decades, the official narrative largely relied on Wagner's account, which painted a picture of Natalie accidentally falling into the water. However, Davin and others later stated that they had observed Natalie in the water under circumstances that didn't align with a simple accident. She had been near the edge of the yacht, trying to step onto a smaller vessel, but there were reports suggesting she may have been struggling, possibly pushed, or caught in a dangerous situation exacerbated by alcohol and confusion. Forensic evidence also raised questions. Autopsy reports noted bruising that some experts suggested could not have occurred simply from falling into the water. While initial investigators treated the findings as inconclusive or accidental, later reviews reopened debate about the possibility of foul play or at least negligence. These physical signs, combined with witness testimony, created a picture of a tragic night that involved both human error and potential conflict. The delay in uncovering the truth was compounded by Hollywood's culture of discretion and image protection. In an era where reputation was everything, many on the yacht were reluctant to speak openly, fearing public backlash or legal repercussions. This silence allowed the accident narrative to dominate for decades, shaping public perception and limiting investigative progress. It wasn't until the 2010s, with advances in forensic analysis and a renewed interest in re-examining cold cases, that authorities began to reconsider the events. Statements from Davin, who had remained largely silent out of loyalty and fear, were revisited. Along with new interpretations of old evidence, investigators started to acknowledge that the night had been far more chaotic than originally reported, that alcohol played a significant role, in that interpersonal conflicts likely contributed to the circumstances leading to Natalie's death. While there is still no definitive conclusion proving intentional harm, the emerging evidence paints a far less innocent picture than the long-standing narrative suggested. What was once considered a tragic accident now appears to be a combination of human conflict, risky decisions, and unfortunate circumstances. A storm of factors that culminated in one of Hollywood's most haunting losses. Natalie's death, it seems, was not just about fate or misfortune. It was about human frailty, secrets, and the pressures of fame that amplified a personal conflict into a public mystery. And for decades, the world was left wondering, questioning, and speculating, waiting for answers that have only recently begun to surface. As more details emerged about the night Natalie Wood died, it became increasingly clear that the tragedy was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. One of the key revelations involves the dynamics on the yacht itself. The interactions, the tensions, and the decisions that contributed to that fatal night. According to statements made decades later by Dennis Davern, the yacht's captain, there were warning signs long before Natalie fell into the water. Davin recounted that Natalie and Robert Wagner had been arguing earlier in the evening. Witnesses described moments of anger, frustration, and emotional intensity, with Natalie visibly upset and inebriated. Alcohol was a factor. Not unusual for a social gathering at sea, but concerning given the precarious environment of a small yacht at night. Those aboard, including Christopher Walken, observed the tension but, as many later admitted, did not fully grasp the seriousness of the situation until it was tragically too late. Investigators also revisited the physical evidence. Natalie's autopsy noted bruising on her body, which some forensic experts believe may indicate a struggle or an altercation prior to entering the water. While the official cause of death remained drowning, questions about how the bruising occurred have persisted for decades. Could she have been pushed, lost her balance while arguing, or simply slipped in a moment of panic? These details, coupled with witness recollections, created a picture far more chaotic than the initial reports suggested. Hollywood culture also played a role in obscuring the truth. The desire to protect reputations, combined with the immense influence of high-profile figures like Wagner, contributed to delayed disclosure of key information. For years, those who could have provided critical insights remained silent, either out of loyalty, fear of public scrutiny, or legal concerns. The combination of secrecy and media misrepresentation allowed the narrative of accidental drowning to dominate public perception, while critical nuances went unreported. By the 2000s, renewed investigations and public interest led authorities to reopen aspects of the case. Statements that had previously been overlooked or dismissed were revisited, including Davin's accounts, which suggested that Wagner may not have been entirely forthcoming with investigators at the time. While definitive proof of foul play has never been legally established, the mounting evidence points to a night that was tragically mismanaged, fraught with human error and compounded by alcohol, tension, and poor judgment. The public began to recognize that the accident label oversimplified a far more complex reality. Natalie Wood was not just a victim of chance. She was caught in a web of human decisions and circumstances that, in hindsight, made her death tragically inevitable. Her brilliance, charm, and talent were matched by her vulnerability that night. A vulnerability exacerbated by those around her, whose actions, inaction, and silence contributed to one of Hollywood's most haunting tragedies. Ultimately, shows that Natalie's death was more than a mysterious accident. It was a convergence of human error, secrecy, and personal conflict. And while the world has long speculated, the newly surfaced details make the tragedy far clearer, though no less heartbreaking. Decades after Natalie Wood's tragic death, the truth has finally begun to emerge, offering clarity on a night that haunted Hollywood for over 40 years. What investigators and insiders now reveal paints a far more disturbing and complex picture than the original reports suggested. This isn't a simple story of a talented actress lost to the sea. It's a story of human error, tension, and secrecy that contributed to a fatal outcome. The renewed scrutiny focuses heavily on the interactions between Natalie, Robert Wagner, and the others on board. According to Dennis Davin, the captain, Natalie had been arguing with Wagner before the incident, with emotions running high and tempers flaring. Alcohol had impaired judgment, creating an environment ripe for mistakes. In such a confined and unstable space as a yacht at night, even small missteps became dangerous. Witness accounts indicate that Natalie may have been trying to board a smaller vessel or move across the deck when the incident occurred. A moment made all the more perilous by heightened emotions and alcohol consumption. Forensic details that had long been overlooked now cast additional doubt on the accident narrative. Bruising and other physical signs observed during the autopsy suggest that the circumstances leading to her fall were not entirely straightforward. While definitive evidence of intentional harm is absent, the combination of human conflict, impaired judgment, and inadequate oversight played a significant role in the tragedy. Those who remained silent or provided incomplete accounts further complicated the ability to understand exactly what happened, leaving decades of speculation in their wake. Hollywood's influence also cannot be understated. The culture of discretion, The prioritization of reputations and the fear of scandal created a situation where critical details were obscured. Friends, family, and industry insiders were hesitant to speak openly, which allowed the simplified story of accidental drowning to dominate headlines for decades. Now, with testimony and investigative review coming to light, the narrative is finally shifting, revealing a more nuanced, heartbreaking truth. The human element of the tragedy is perhaps the most striking. Natalie Wood, at the height of her career, was a woman navigating fame, personal relationships, and the vulnerabilities that come with both. She was beloved by millions, but isolated in critical ways on the night of her death. Those around her, though perhaps not malicious, failed to provide the necessary care, attention, or transparency that could have prevented the tragedy. What emerges is a sobering lesson about responsibility, the fragility of life, and the consequences of secrecy. In conclusion, the Natalie Wood mystery, once shrouded in decades of speculation, has finally been clarified, though the answers are far from comforting. It is a tale of talent cut short, of human error compounded by secrecy, and of Hollywood's complex interplay between image, privacy, and truth. Fans now understand that her death was not merely an accident. It was the tragic culmination of a night defined by human failings and flawed choices. Natalie Wood remains a Hollywood legend, but her story is also a cautionary one. Even the brightest stars can be vulnerable, and the truth, no matter how long delayed, eventually comes to light. Her legacy now includes not just her films, but the hard lessons of that fateful night, reminding us of the delicate line between fame, human error, and tragedy.